All right, how we doing, everybody? It's Jim Ventura, your navigational consultant, here with another update YouTube video. I'm actually in the process of writing a new book. I'm actually close to halfway through it already, but the book is not a metaphysical book. I went back to some of my early roots in just simple storytelling, leaning a lot toward comedy in my storytelling. Anyone who's had sessions with me or knows me, a lot of times kind of funny stories slip in. I don't charge people for that time when I do sessions with them. It's an add-on, and they generally like it. So anyway, the new book is called, tentatively titled My Cast of Characters, and it's about all the interesting people that I've met in my lifetime through childhood and even into my early adulthood and even in the last few years. I think we've all had some interesting characters in our life, and they can range between being wonderful and horrible, and sometimes the lines are thin between the two. So I took a little creative license with some of my storytelling, sometimes changing the names and a little bit of detail, just to preserve some anonymity for certain people and things. But overall, creative license, so most of these stories are pretty accurate for the most part, but kind of fun. I'm not being mean in any way, but they're stories of people and things that shaped me. The book is very heavily geared toward a lot of childhood stories, which I have had that weird, uncanny memory of remembering things about childhood. So, without further ado, I'm going to read one of the stories live. I might make some added commentary on it, so just kind of a fun break from our normal spiritual metaphysical stuff, and a little sneak peek into a book I'm working on and looking at getting published probably realistically in 2023. So, all right, I need my glasses for this because I am going to read off the paper here a little bit. Okay, so this piece is called, from Cast of Characters, is called She's a Little Bit Dangerous. In February of 1989, it was my first trip to explore Arizona. I was contemplating moving to Phoenix at the tender age of 24. I thought I would check out Sedona since I was big into the metaphysical stories about that place, and then also make a trip to Los Angeles as well to see if it was a practical, better choice. After 2 amazing days in Phoenix, my travel companion and I, Laurel, and I rented a car to visit LA. A waitress friend of mine had moved to LA months before from New York with her boyfriend and really wanted us to visit and stay with them for a day or two. We made the 6-hour drive from Phoenix. It was harrowing and a bit scary to deal with the crazy freeways of Los Angeles. In New York, where I lived, we never actually drove around the city when we visited the actual city, and typically used mass transit to get in and out of New York City. We were both a bit nervous as we drove through California, and when it started to rain, Laurel began to cry and had to pull over and have me take the wheel. The Saturday afternoon traffic was really horrible. The ordeal of the drive, countless mistakes, keeping in mind this was before Google Maps, when it was just paper maps, and a host of arguments between us. Yet finally, after about 6.5 hours, we found Beth's apartment. We trudged up the stairs with our luggage, feeling exhausted and certainly looking disheveled. We were ready for some hospitality, knowing Beth was excited to see us. A slender, sharply dressed young woman answered the door. She was probably about 20 years old. It was Beth's roommate, who actually owned the apartment. She opened the door a crack and peeked out. I said, "Hey, it's Beth's friend Jim. Is Beth here?" She replied uncomfortably, "She's still at work," and added nothing else after that. After about 2 to 3 excruciating minutes passed, I finally said, "Well, can we come in and wait for her?" She frowned and begrudgingly let us in. She showed us Beth's small room in the large apartment and actually closed the door behind us while we waited with our luggage for about an hour or so for Beth to come home. So we expressed different ranges of what the hell and sarcastic comments about what a friendly chick. Beth arrived about 45 minutes later and asked why we just didn't wait in the living room. My uncomfortable response was we weren't actually given that choice. This was sadly our first welcome to the LA moment. Beth's boyfriend showed up and we grabbed pizza and some wine and we all played Trivial Pursuit, really popular at that time. Had a blast in the living room. Beth's roommate never came out of her room, even though Beth invited her to play and hang out. Two other roommates that shared a small room with bunk beds came home. They were young, 18-year-old struggling actors. They quickly exchanged hellos and also disappeared into their room. Beth told me the little bit she knew about them, and I guess they were likely two closet queens, literally sharing a closet. They slept in a tiny room in bunk beds. It seemed funny to me, but it was 1989, and I totally got why they were just pretending to be close friends. Laurel and I inevitably slept on the two couches in the living room, and I could hear Beth arguing with her generous roommate about us sleeping on the floor in Beth's room instead. Beth was strong enough and won, so we crashed on the couches at maybe 1:30 a.m. After maybe 6 hours of choppy sleep, we were woken by the princess. She was playing the song Dangerous by Roxette over and over while she loudly put together a gourmet buffet for her soon-to-be visiting parents coming by on Sunday morning. She hummed her theme song when it played and also painfully to her ears when it ended, clearly proud of her modern skills. Maybe she thought she was a little bit dangerous or some such nonsense. She set up a huge buffet of gourmet muffins, cakes, Danish, cereals, bagels, and an assortment of juices while she brewed coffee. There was seriously enough food for about 20 people, and it was just going to be her and her parents. We, of course, were starving and asked her where we could get a bit to eat or at least a coffee. She was irritated that we spoke, or even existed, and told us to go down the street to the deli. We headed out in disbelief. There was nowhere to sit in the deli, and we knew Beth would wake up soon, so we uncomfortably headed back to the apartment with our coffees. The princess' parents arrived and looked at us awkwardly and finally asked who we were. We introduced ourselves and sat on the couch while her parents remarked at how great the place looked and what a great spread she'd put together for them. It was kind of surreal. Was this how LA people were? She was not physically unattractive, but kind of skinny, decent shape, but she was not actually pretty. She talked a bit about a bit part she was sure to get. Shockingly, she wanted to be an actor, who would imagine? That could lead to bigger things. I wondered what opportunities there were actually for an absolute cliche of a human being. Again, she played her obnoxious song that I was beginning to despise. She had her dad help her hang a painting she'd purchased from a current Japanese artist being talked about in magazines. It wasn't that great. She danced to her song, chatted incessantly to her parents, yet, while seriously talking a lot, basically said nothing. I was guessing she was living off Daddy's credit cards, and at this point, before her theoretical big break, soon to come, I actually wanted to give her another kind of break. Beth and her boyfriend finally got up. She didn't offer them any food either. I'd see her parents were feeling uncomfortable about the whole thing, but what could they do anyway? Beth thankfully ushered us out to grab a breakfast at a diner and share and catch up on some stories. Most of them were a list of horrible things she was dealing with about her roommate and what a control freak she was. It was clear to me that there was an ongoing battle between Beth and the princess, and we were collateral. We actually had fun, decided to adjust the lines of her song that the dangerous diva kept repeatedly singing. I kind of added little subtitles to some of the lines of the song while we're sitting in the diner. So, hold on tight, you know she's a bit dangerous. I think the first line of the song. She's got what it takes to make ends meet. Yeah, bleeding off her daddy's wealth was how she did this. The eyes of a lover like heat. Yeah, more likely an ice queen when there was no possible heat. Dangerous. Oh, just a bit dangerous. More like a little bit talentless and seriously clueless. we laughed, we had a good time, made fun of her, friends catching up in LA. Beth begged us to stay another night, but that was not happening. So we headed back to Phoenix a day early. The Sedona day trip was actually really nice. We checked out some of the Vortexes, shops, and had some fun. But back then, it was a very small town. I wasn't excited about small town living in my 20s, and Phoenix had far more opportunities to work with. I picked up an apartment guide and found a one-bedroom apartment in Phoenix, well, Mesa technically, for $260 a month. Let that one run around in your mind for a minute. $260. A year later, I made the move to Phoenix, even though Laurel backed out. In a weird way, our not-so-fun trip to LA contributed to a solid, even unquestionable decision to move to Phoenix. In her own way, the princess was useful. Still to this day, I can't remember her name. It's not likely that her big break probably ever came anyway. I'm guessing not many other people ever knew her name either. Okay, so that's one of the stories from my cast of characters, and kind of wanted to share that. It's basically true, and that's partly how I actually got to Phoenix, playing back and forth between Sedona and Phoenix, and made that big move. And yeah, my friend Laurel, she backed out of coming, and I ended up bringing someone else with me who ended up being a criminal. I wrote about that in my first book, Dirty Little Secrets. You can actually get that from Amazon. Anyway, so it's a fun little story. No hard feelings toward it. Never heard from Beth again. That severed, and even a couple of years later, I think Laurel stopped speaking to me for some such reason. But that's kind of the funny thing about friends. Sometimes we have friends for life. That stick with us through decades, and other times people kind of come and go, and that's cool. I don't really get upset about that. I think we evolve, we change, and we grow, and sometimes people are moving in another direction. But anyway, so that's my how I got to Phoenix story. All right, wanted to take a little break from my normal metaphysical stuff. I may actually start a channel specifically devoted to some of these stories, but still working on finishing the book, and I'll set up some news about that when we're in the process of getting published. All right, till next time, boys and girls, cheers.